Welcome to The Real Deal, where we get real about what it takes to succeed. Whether it's wealth, health, relationships, or finding your purpose, we talk to the masters to uncover the secrets to defying the odds and creating your own rock star legacy. I'm Doug, and after working on multiple Grammy-winning records as an author, transformational speaker, and your personal translightenment coach, I'm committed to your growth and success. And now, here's the real deal. All right, so welcome. Are you ready for the best introduction you have had all day?
Well, it is 10:30 in the morning, so yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
You ready? All right, here we go. Today's episode of The Real Deal On is brought to you by GuidedHypnotic.com. Are you feeling stressed out, riddled with anxiety, maybe waking up with night terrors? Then an anxiety-busting guided hypnotic meditation is just right for you. Go head to GuidedHypnotic.com and download your free anxiety-busting guided hypnotic meditation. All right, so my brother from another mother here, we met a few years ago and have been just finding ways to do incredible things, but it's important that you learn a bit about our wonderful guest right now. He sent me a fantastic bio. I'm going to do my best not to hack it up because part of what we're going to talk about is what's next. And he's done so much, but what's next is the new bio is what's most important for us all, isn't it? With over 30 years of full event branding and production experience, Cruz is a seasoned TV and radio personality, event host, and public speaker, traveling throughout the country on behalf of corporations, conventions, concerts, and large-scale events, as well as brand launchings, grand openings, and more. Mr. Cruz has developed an entrepreneurial muscles over the past 20 years with invaluable experience in the world of consulting, developing, and launching new businesses, including Creative Resource, Behind the Mic, TV and radio hosting workshops, PhotoMingle Miami, and the Neo Splash experience. He also has his finger on the pulse of development and rebranding for many other companies along the way. As an on-air radio personality with Y100 Miami and iHeartRadio since 2005, Chris has positioned himself as a hard-to-miss host. He has done television with Deco Drive, NBC6, and other channels throughout his long career. Other big-name media outlets have worked with include MTV, the VMAs, Emmys, Grammys, Billboard Music Awards, and more. In addition to hundreds of signature events, Cruz has conducted countless life coaching events and seminars, currently working on The Power of Re, a personal development program that will help you reset, rethink, and restart your life's meaning in career, marriage, goals, passion, and ultimately discovering your re-purpose. When you meet him, and you're meeting him right now, you will be instantly reassured of his talents and passion. He is a people person in every sense of the word. As an idea man, his brain never stops roaring forward, always searching for the next big eureka moment. With Puerto Rican flair, practical tools, riveting stories, and contagious optimism, Cruz's mission is to help people and organizations adapt boldly, nimbly, and quickly in the face of exponential change. Whew, that was a mouthful. Sorry, I flubbed a little bit. But, dude, thank you so much. Pardon?
Thank you for having me. I said that's not easy to do.
No, I probably should have read it before I read it, but
super hard cold read.
It's the background. So thank you so much for sharing your most valuable asset, your time, and in that time, your wisdom and experience. And the quick backstory is when we first met, we were introduced by a mutual friend, and we had lunch and just hit it off. And you were already looking at kind of transitioning back then a few years ago, and now here we are speeding all of these things up. But share a little bit, how did you get into doing the radio, TV, VOs? Like, what was your journey? Because when we first met, you have a lot of pots boiling and a lot of plates spinning.
That's what they call an entrepreneur.
Indeed.
I radio and hosting has really been my whole life. I can take you as far back as, remember doing the 5th grade talent shows, and I would, wrangle a whole bunch of friends in my class together, and I'm like, we're going to do the show. And I would always put myself in this, the center of the group. And And it really kind of it's always been inside of me to be a performer. The speaking part kind of came when I was about 13 years old. I had my cousin's really good friend was a DJ, and he would invite me to a teen party that he would DJ every Friday and Saturday night. Fortunately for me, this particular DJ did not like being on microphone. So there were times where it was like a crash course, because there were times where, there would an announcement that had to be made, like, Bobby, your mom's at the front door, go now. You're not even supposed to be here. You snuck out of the house. So little by little, I started to do that. And over the course of about a year or 2 years, it just became, I was doing it every weekend, 13 into 14. And then from that point, it just kind of grew. And I started hosting events and nightclubs and parties. And then I got into doing, the social stuff, the weddings and, the regular kind of parties that people hire DJs and MCs for, and just got groomed. I didn't lock into radio until I went back to New York. And then one day I just said, hey, I want to do radio. And
so what year was that? Like because it's different now getting into radio than it was back then.
That was my first gig in radio was 2001.
Okay. And what was your first station?
It
was in New York.
It was not Power 105.1. It was. I tried applying to Z100 because that was around.
Back then they were huge. Yeah,
never called me back. Then I tried applying to KTU New York, which is kind of like a rhythmic station. Then I wasn't able to get in there, and then finally I kept calling. I was like, just can you speak to me? So finally, the guy calls me back and he says, you've called here so many times, just come in. So I go in and I'm sitting there, and I had already worked production and gigs with MTV, did the VMAs, did 4 VMAs.
Did you have a demo reel at that time?
No, I was just doing stuff. But when I say I was working with MTV and then those guys, I was in production. So I was on an A-list talent wrangler team. So they, whenever it was like major celebrities that were on property at Radio City or Madison Square Garden, I was on a very short, small team of people that they entrusted to work with these specific A-list celebrities. Because, you work with, there were so many big ones, but let's say Robin Williams. I got to work with Robin when he was at Madison Square Garden for the Grammys. So I was part of that particular team, and they put me on with him because you can't, you got to trust who you're putting with certain people. So that was more production. So I had a lot of that. And then I was still hosting parties on the weekends, but I got that urge to want to do radio. Never did radio. I just I want to do radio now. Let's, and I wanted to be on camera. I did audition for TRL back in the day, which is weird.
Total Request Live, right?
Yeah. And I remember I would work production as well. I was doing TRL, and Carson was at his peak, and one of the first times I ever saw Britney Spears was actually at TRL. And so it's cool because I got so many really ridiculous memories. I was in the room at Radio City when Britney and Madonna kissed in that infamous kiss years ago. Wow. That became massive. And it's been a journey. So I decided I wanted to do radio. Nobody was calling me back. Finally, they called me back at KTU. And it was really just persistence, because at one point in the interview, he sees that I had done production, I worked MTV, and I had all these different things that I'd done. He goes, well, you do all this, why do you want to work in radio? And I go, well, because at the time there was a position answering phones, possibly. And he goes, well, it's just answering phones. It's $8 an hour. Why would you want a job like that? I go, well, if that means my foot in the door, then I'll take the $8 job answering phones.
And you left work in production for that gig. And which I assume you were making more than $8 an hour. Yeah,
you made more like your shift production pay or your day rate and stuff like that. Yeah. But when I did New York was so. When I think about it now, it gives me anxiety because you can only really pursue that type of life when you're young and essentially hungry and it's a little bit naive, because all you know is just go, 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 go. Now when I look back, I'm like, wow, I went through a lot and I took a lot of chances and risks. But you have to kind of look back at those chances and risks, because I think as you get older, you become complacent and you don't take as many because you're married, because you have kids, because you have a steady job that you're not happy at and you should get out of it, but you don't, because you don't want to risk, well, I have a salary, I have benefits. Oh, well.
Yeah. So you know what the 3 worst addictions are for entrepreneurs?
Is what?
Sugar, heroin, and a salary.
Salary, exactly. Salary means that you've just capped yourself off.
Yep.
That's it. You just put a cap on yourself, and that's what it is. But the first job was at Jammin' 105.1. It was a classic R&B radio station, answering the phones, and the phone rang probably once an hour.
Answering the phones, like for people just curious, for some, or like for the host?
I was answering the phone for the DJ. So they would call, they want to do, they're calling the request line, and I pick up the phone, I do the request, and I was dealing with some super old school DJs, and its time went so slowly because it was the most unexciting job on the planet. That radio station ended up becoming what it is now. It's Power 105, so it's the biggest hip hop station in New York now. About a couple months later, I somehow, I went, the vice president of Clear Channel at the time, who I ended up becoming his executive assistant, was at Jammin', because he was overseeing Jammin'. And this is how life just works, and things just like kind of happen. He was there, and I was just a young kid, and I was like, that's the boss. So I went up to him. He didn't know who I was. I was like, hey, Mr. Blue. His name was Frankie Blue. Mr. Blue, my name is Cruz. I wanted to say hello to you. If you ever need anything, I'll do whatever. Long story short, the music director came to me about a month later and said, hey, there's a phone operator position opening up for a new night show at KTU. Do you want to, move over? So I did. 2 months into that, Frankie came, brought me to his office, and for a week he had me doing all kinds of random stuff. And I remember, because I thought it was the weirdest thing on the planet, he's like, can you go get me coffee? Can you organize my CDs on the wall? Can you go get me, was it Cozies or Koozies? It was like a sandwich shop in New York.
Okay.
Random stuff for a week. That Friday, he sits me down. He says, hey, listen, I'm looking for an executive assistant full-time with salary benefits. Would you be interested? And I go, let me think about that. Part-time phone guy making $8 an hour to salary assistant to the senior vice president of programming for New York. So it's like a Cinderella story, because I went from being like a nobody to like untouchable. And it got to the point where people, like a lot of people, didn't really like me, because now it's like, I was like a made guy, if you will.
Right.
That opportunity opened the door for me to be able to go in the studio. And then I never had technical training. I would just, at the end of every day, like 5, 6 o'clock when my day was over, I'd go into a studio that was closed. I'd go in there to start pushing buttons. I take the scripts that the DJs left in the room. It's kind of like a Les Brown story, because Les talks about
it's what's reminding me of
the radio
yeah.
studio. And he was, the DJ was drunk one day, and he was just waiting for, his opportunity to get on the microphone. And then as soon as he did, he took it and ran with it. And that's what happened. So one day I would do the scheduling for all the DJs. And I remember one day it was getting close to Thanksgiving weekend, and I had submitted a tape to my boss. Says, hey, I made a tape, and just check it out to see if you like it. Well, I end up looking at the schedule, and then I see my name on the schedule, Thanksgiving Eve, which is the Wednesday night, and that was my first shot on the radio live, and been on the radio ever since until January of this year.
Wow!
And I decided to leave iHeart. So,
well, I mean,
it's been a journey. There's a lot more stuff that happened in between.
No, of course. Well, of course.
I was just part of radio.
Yeah. What is so telling about that is, you'll hear this in every success story, is the persistence, the ability to kind of take a step back, humble yourself. Hey, I'll take that gig. I mean, our stories are similar. I interned at a studio and I worked for free, and I did the exact same thing, or even then once even became an assistant. But I would, during the day, do as an intern, grab coffee and, do cut tape and all of that, solder wires. Then when I'd stay till the gig was like the session was over, and then I'd spend till 3, 4 in the morning. I'd be practicing on the console and all of that, and sleep on the couch, take a shower that I had a shower, and then do that again. And within 6 months, I was working there, and next thing you know, we're winning Grammys. But yeah, there's a consistency that is required that some people don't sometimes do. They try a little bit. They'll go, oh, I called a person. Well, no, it's more than one call. It's, probably 200 calls, 2,000 calls. I went in and I took that gig for $8 an hour for a month, and nothing happened. And it's the consistency.
Just keep talking, because my power's going down. I don't want to disrupt you, but keep talking.
Oh, your power's going down. That's crazy. Wow, look at you. You're gone. You've disappeared. You're like, oh, there you go. You're back. It's like you're cranking it. So yeah, there's always these elements of consistency, like you modeled Les Brown's story, being in the right place at the right time. That's, fortune meets when, you're consistently in a situation where someone could go, hey, why don't you come on here, and you get a chance to share.
Yeah, that's part of life.
Yeah, it's huge.
Is that opportunity? I'm sorry.
Yeah, all good.
If I lost power, I didn't realize it was low. Go ahead.
Well, and obviously this is about you to find out, how that all is. I'm not here to talk about my experiences. You could find out.
No. But listen, but you're right, and a lot of times it's nice when you can share a story and you only understand it when it's like-minded by somebody else, because until you've gone through it, you really can't get it. It's like, I've never been in the military, but I can only imagine, like, if I was to go into training to be a military soldier or something like that, that experience of boot camp and everything, unless you've been through it, you don't understand it. I ran a marathon. Unless you've run a marathon and you train for a marathon, you don't understand what it is to run a marathon. Like, it's mentally, it's physical, it's a lot. But, yeah, you have to put that determination. And I ended up getting fired from that position because my boss got fired. So they let me go. I took a quick job in Long Island at another radio station, and I did an overnight position from midnight to 5 a.m.
Which station there? Because I'm from Long Island, so it'd be
106.1 BLI.
Okay.
So it was in West Babylon.
Yeah.
I lived in Brooklyn. I would walk from my house to the train at like 10 o'clock at night, take the train to the Long Island Railroad, take the Long Island Railroad to West Babylon, an hour, take car service from the train to the station, then work from midnight to 5 a.m. In most cases, I go to the conference room downstairs, and I bring a pillow with me, sleep under the conference room table for an hour or so, take a car ride back to the train. Wow. Then I worked a part-time job during the day. So, And
were you married at that time?
No.
Okay.
No. That wasn't so much later. So, but that's the persistence that you put in if you really want to succeed in something, whether it's, it's sports, it's music. If you look at anybody's story, I was watching some stuff on Kevin Hart the other day, and, people think that he's this massive superstar, and he is. But he'll tell the story where he would go from Philly to New York 5-6 times a week to do gigs every week. And we drive an hour and a half every day there and back, just to get his name out there and get the work in.
Yep.
If you would ask me now, like, hey, take an hour ride on a train to go do an overnight radio thing, I would think that it would be crazy. But back then it was really just, I was doing what I was passionate about, and I did it. I did whatever I had to do. I didn't even think about it. You just do it.
And that was introing songs and that kind of thing. It wasn't like talk,
no, just typical radio.
Right.
Yeah, typical radio stuff.
And back then, you actually had to spin the records, whereas now, when I first started, I had carts. Yeah.
So I remember working for a DJ in New York, part of that first part of my radio career, and I was kind of a little bit of a part-time producer, and I would get a list of all the music for each hour for the 4 hours that she's going to be on air, and I'd have to pull all the carts, and I literally would have to stack them based on when she's playing them. So the one that's coming up would be the top one, and then the next one, and the next one. Yeah. And then if you missed up the stack, it was a problem, which can't happen. You put the wrong one, and it wasn't the right one. And like old school DJs back in the day were very temperamental. They had like their ways and their things, the way they did their radio stuff. So, it's been a journey. And then it wasn't until a little bit after that I started really tapping more into being on camera and learning how to do more of the interviewing and
So how did you transition into that?
I just started taking on, stuff at the radio station that allowed me. Even when I started at Y100 after I left New York, I was one of the first few people that started bringing video to the table. If you look at my reel, I have original video of interviews with me, like in Jason Derulo, probably back in 2003, 2004, and video wasn't as apparent as it is now. Like now everybody's doing video. Like this is this is even a couple of years before. I mean, this is way before TikToks and all this stuff and Instagram. But I said that video was going to be an important thing, and that became another thing. It was really just trial and error. And I remember working with a couple of people that when I would do my interviews, I was so internal of what I was going to ask next, or I was worried about what I was going to say and how I was going to say it and what I was going to ask them, what the next question was going to be. And I wasn't having a conversation. And little by little, again, trial and error, I learned to kind of get out of my head and just have to be more in the moment and just really have that conversation. So one of the things that I started doing with a lot of my celebrity interviews, and you can kind of see it in some of the stuff that I've done, I kind of stopped preparing questions. I did. I stopped. Unless I knew it was like a big person I was interviewing and it was a major question. Because a lot of those major questions you learn in Hollywood, unless you're Seacrest or something, you don't even want to ask those questions, because then you're just going to get into something with the publicist or the manager or the artist. They're not going to like you.
Well, so how often were you handed, say, here's what you're like the questions that we want you asking, like here's what we're covering.
Yeah, here's, and I would even ask, like, hey, is there anything you don't want me to ask?
Right.
Because I was still trying to grow my brand and grow myself as personality, I just kind of stay out of the red zone. So I just kept all my interviews like just fluffy and. They would just, I've had some good interviews with Charlie Puth and so many of them. And I really just kept it, hey, like, love your outfit. What's going on? We're here. Like, if it was like Jingle Ball, what are you doing for Christmas? What do you do for the holidays that, your fans don't know? And I just really just made it more like if I was just talking to you, let's say Doug, what would I talk to you about? Same thing. The thing that I've realized working with so many celebrities over the years, and you only know this if you're really in the industry. They're people. They're just, they really are. They poop. They get mad. You only see a lot of that stuff behind the scenes and when they're off camera. Right. And there's some really genuine good ones, and there's some real, not good ones.
Well, and obviously that goes in every area of life. The one challenge that often happens with celebrity, in my experience, is sometimes they're so insulated with yes people. It's difficult to have sort of a real conversation depending on what is happening in that moment. If they're in that mode of like, okay, yeah, I'm just on, like I'm playing almost a character. If that makes sense, has been my experience. And mine is more music, so it's a little bit of a slightly different hat to be wearing, because I think when you're. My experience anyway has been like, if you're a face, if you're an actor, if you've got also a mission, you want to have use your celebrity for some, messaging of sorts. It's a different headspace than like when you're meeting. I mostly met them and I would work with them, either like touring or making records. So we had a different focus. Like we were working on we had the similar outcome. Where I think the interviews and what you were doing is kind of a little different, where you're kind of hanging out and going, hey, let's just kind of share something. And that's why I asked if you got directed questions like, oh, here's, they're talking about this book or this movie or.
Yeah. Usually we would just kind of prep ourselves, whatever we felt we needed to bring up. I had my share of performing. Years ago when I was younger, I went on tour with a couple, smaller groups and did shows, and then I had a little opportunity.
As what?
At that time, I did some backup dancing.
Okay, cool.
It was cool, I had fun. Got to travel when I was much younger. Yeah. There's a young artist that came out. He became pretty popular. I helped discover him, Jake Miller, and I remember going on one of the first few tours as his tour manager. And I used to see it when I do the interviews or when I do Jingle Ball, with certain artists that would come in and they do their, when they do the meet and greets and we shuffle all these people through. It can get I don't want to say overwhelming, but I can see how artists can really get irritated because some people just don't really know when to stop.
Right.
Take their photo and then, they want to take more from that moment. And I understand, and it's the artist's responsibility to, absorb it because listen, this is why you're here. So you signed up for it, but then sometimes the opposite, some people can just really be a lot. I mean, I've seen certain situations where I'm like, okay, enough. I mean, I've had situations when I was on tour with Jake. I mean, I would have to sometimes pull him out of the situation, because if I don't do that, then he's kind of stuck, because he can't be the bad person or the rude one. Right. I kind of have to be, the bad guy and stuff. So that it's been, I mean, I got stories for days of all the cool experiences, and really just, it's everything that I've done over the course of time. And then with everything that's recently happened, I know you and I are going to discuss that a little bit as well, but that I think opens a door for part 2 or a new chapter or the next level. And the unfortunate truth is the mass majority of everybody in the world never wants to go there, right? They kind of want to stay in their little lane. And I think it's
go where? Go where?
To a next level or a next step, because
right.
I think as humans, as people, we never stay the same. Like, you're not Doug that you were when you were 21. You're not Doug you were when you're 25 or 30.
Right.
We change, but then we're programmed, and that's part of the stuff that I talk about as I'm writing the new book is how we are, subconsciously and consciously programmed by our lives, our surroundings, and also the first 7 years of our lives. Which a lot of science shows that we stay in this little bubble. I think a lot of it came from, I don't know about, your upbringing, your parents, or that last generation, that it's like, get a good job, work forever and get Social Security and save some money. And it's like, why? And moreover, we can't do that anymore, because none of that, we're a whole different,
well, yeah, totally. It's interesting how those, we see it in our industries. We see how they shifted. We do the microcosm. We look at how music, radio, all of that was delivered. You're talking about the carts. Then it went into, digital. Same thing with making music. It was tape. And then it became Pro Tools or some sort of, it became digital tape. Then it went to, Pro Tools. No, it went. We even had ADATs in there,
it was real. Then it went to MIDI, and then
there's all. So, and that changed the way we did stuff, and also changed the way music was distributed and all of that. And the other, I think, conditioning that we're experiencing is how quickly we expect results. Whereas in the past, there was a certain, we understood the seasons of how, when you use the example, our parents would, say you get a job and then you get your benefits and your pension. And then when you retire, you live off of that. And that doesn't exist the way it used to. We're becoming a very gig economy. But if we look, then we step back even more. Their families, if you look at the way our parents grew up, they grew up during a war. They grew up during, in different wars, because you went off, the family went off, and then the parents were being raised. You worked on a farm. There was all these different dynamics that paradigm would then get transferred to us that may or may not be appropriate. And we're going through that again now at a rapid pace. You have children. How many do you have?
I have 3 and 1 on the way.
Okay. So, and what's the age difference?
10, 7, and 5. And then, the new one, which will be born in October.
Wow. Congratulations. And imagine that 10-year span, how much different your 10-year-old's model of the world is going to be to your newborn. What the experience is, what the exposure, what the expectations are is incredible at the rate at which things are changing.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of going a little bit, taking a step backwards. When I came down to South Florida, I took the job with Y100 in 2005. I think it was maybe 6 months or whatever. I wasn't really blessed with what I wanted at the time, a full-time on-air position, which led me to then, again, sidestep and figure out, the next thing. And I started an event company. That event company kind of spanned for over probably 11 years. And we did predominantly well. Still managed to work in radio part-time. But a couple of years ago is when I started to kind of foresee that didn't really want to probably do this much longer. The market was getting heavily saturated in South Florida. So I needed to find a way to sidestep and get out. So I stayed in radio, and then that's when it started to dawn on me, I think about 3 years ago. Even though I had been successful in so many different things, and I've lost and I won, and I made a lot of money, I lost a lot of money. I kind of asked that age-old question, like, what makes me happy? Like, what do I really want to do? Especially for me, it was weird because I've done so many different things. Like, I've worked for so many massive companies and media companies and iHeart and Clear Channel, MTV and celebrities and HBO. And, I had my own company at the time, and at that point I was married. I don't know if you know this, but high school dropout, got my GED when I was in 9th grade. I was working nightclubs at the time. I was making tons of money. I was like, this is silly. I'm making more money on the weekends than going to home economics. Like, what is that? Never stopped me from getting any of the gigs that I did over the course, into my later teens and 20s and whatever the case is. But around 30, I was working with Vitamin Water in South Florida. And at the time I just got engaged. Was doing pretty well. Was just getting ready to start the company. I was working for the radio station part-time, doing parties on the weekends part-time. I was working like a beast, like 7 days, 14 days, 21 days straight. And I was offered a really awesome position with Coke at the time. This is before I started the company and really launched that. And it was declined, the position, because I didn't have a 4-year degree. And I remember, like, vividly, the regional director said, "Chris, we love you. You've been working with us. You're it for the position, but based on Coca-Cola's corporate policies, I can't give you the job." And at the time, I was 30, 29, and it would have been an awesome job. It was like close to 6 figures, the whole 9 yards. It would have been like perfect. I said, well, that's not going to happen. This is part of the whole reset entrepreneur mentality that I was like, I'm not going to sit here and be a victim that I can't have something, because I don't want to call it a mistake that I got my GD.
It was a decision that you made no matter either way. It's not it just is what it is.
So I told my wife at the time, we just got engaged or married. And I said, well, I don't want that to ever be an issue. I didn't know where my business was going to go because I didn't really fully launch it. It ended up doing really well. But so I said, well, I'm going to go back to, I remember in our hiring process, when I was just working with Vitamin Water, I hired a girl and she went to Full Sail, right? She told me about the school Full Sail in Orlando, and she was doing an online program to get her bachelor's degree. So I was like, well, I don't really have the time to go back to college for 4 years. So I looked into it. I ended up getting, I went to the accelerated program at Full Sail, and I ended up getting my bachelor's in entertainment business. And I mean, to date, I'm pretty much the only person in my family that actually has a college degree. I mean, I don't, it's not worth much now, but
yeah, it's such an interesting
college degree. I'm a college graduate.
Well, congratulations. And it's so interesting. As a friend of mine mentors, he's got 6 kids, and he's not a high school dropout. He did some stuff, but he had 3 sets of twins. Paul Fink, we did an interview as well. Great guy. And, but he was sharing, like, he did go to some school and all that. His story is interesting, but he's like, man, my kids, he's noticed that entrepreneurs and the people who are the most successful rarely are the most educated.
Oh, agreed.
And he's like, I'm getting a little nervous. My kids are doing great in school.
Yeah. I mean, listen, school is for who it really makes sense for. I mean, if I thought about it now, if I kind of knew a little bit of what my future was going to kind of roll out to be, because everything happened so quickly, I don't know if I would have taken made the decision again and got the degree, because that's part of entrepreneurship. I have a lot more controversial statements to make about college and degrees, but I won't, because we're talking public. But school and college and degrees are for those who actually, I think, need it.
Right. Of course, if you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, anything that has a need for licensure, continued education, and that kind of thing, that, of course, that makes sense. There's, that's appropriate.
When I was taking my first courses, I had already done so many different things, and I was already starting the business. I was working with Vitamin Water. I had worked with all the companies in New York. And I just felt I was running to a lot of things that they were teaching me that I'm like, well, I've done that. I do that now.
Well, it's like Thornton Mellon, like at the business school.
Leg up, but you weren't teaching me anything that was new to me. And I was like, if anything, I should have probably been teaching a class.
Yep.
But we got through it, and it's a degree. I mean, if my children, whatever, I will always encourage them just to make sure that they do whatever they're passionate about. Because genuinely, I think if you're passionate about something and you put the effort and the hard work into it, you don't really need a degree to make that happen. And I have a handful of friends that are not college educated and are 7-figure earners, and they have successful, businesses, because I think it's a gene, it's a trait that's within us that makes us that person. You can't make somebody a successful CEO or a business person. It's within their being.
Right.
You can't learn that anywhere. Like, you can only learn it by doing it and working hard, but there's no educational form that's going to really, doctors, stuff like that, you have to learn things about whether law or the body or, that, of course.
Yeah, entrepreneurs, there is no school for entrepreneurship other than the school of experience and hard knocks. And ideally, modeling. Right. And that's where, this show comes into play, is that this is an opportunity to model entrepreneurs, successful people, find out what they did that's different than the person who doesn't succeed. Like, how did you navigate your way is valuable information, because there are people who maybe are right now, have some experience in radio, have experience in personality and all of that. And then they're going, oh my gosh, things are changed. The whole, the whole climate has changed.
Yeah.
And, and there's probably someone who may have just had a job and they're going, oh, I want to start now. I want to start my own thing. And we can expose people to some of the patterns, some of the behaviors, some of the mindsets, some of the beliefs necessary to create the level of success that they're going for. What was your favorite thing to do when you were in that world? Was it the interviews? Was it the radio? Was it the what brought you the most joy?
And even recently, because I'm a national host. I do a national convention for a big marketing group. One of my most favorite, and this is what ended up bringing me to a couple of years ago, I started to make the decision of what I figured was going to be that transition into the next. I love live audiences. So whenever you put me on a stage in front of people, it's the best energy on the planet. I never really loved radio because I never had a face for radio, jokingly. I always said it, if many people who heard me saw my face, a lot more people would recognize me. Because when I would, have conversations and then, we'd go, oh, what do you do? And, oh, I work in radio. Oh, who are you? Oh, Cruz. Like, oh my God, I heard you. So because they never see you technically, unless they go to the website and they look up your bio or whatever. But being live, even like last year when I got to Vegas and I hosted in front of like 6,000 people and, walking into the room and getting kind of like my run of show, my script, and then, getting mic'd up, and that whole like vibe is just like, you get out there and, the voice of God says you presents you, and everybody's, it's just, and people are just excited and they're motivated and they're, there's nothing like it. I had it about 3 years ago, I had a really awesome opportunity to be a stage manager, but also be the voice of God for the 10X Growth Conference for Grant Cardone. And it was pretty cool because I think it was the first time that, I've hosted like Jingle Ball and stuff, but hearing my voice for the period of 3 days as the voice of God at the Mandalay Bay Arena, introducing like Grant Cardone, Ty Lopez, Damon John. And it's funny because if I was able to show you the video, I always ask people, do you think I did that live or do you think that I did it in a room? And funny enough, when I recorded it, even though when you hear it on the video, this video was particularly for Russell Brunson. And Russell ended up using this particular clip. Matter of fact, can I show you the clip?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to show you because it's pretty interesting to share, and I think it'll. You got it.
I gotta give you. Do you have permission, or do I have to give you permission?
You gotta give me permission.
You know, so letting you do it now.
Yep. And share. So let's go here. Can you see me?
Yep.
And as I was trying to get into this space, which is the speaking space, and I'll tell you the rest of the story and how I got here. For me, it was such an amazing opportunity because I started watching a lot of these guys and getting familiar who they were. And then it's almost like the law of attraction, you know, knew that I was searching for it, and then it presented itself to me. Which, by the way, if you go to Cruz Live on YouTube, you can check out this. But this is the video.
We're not hearing it.
10 years, this man has built a following of entrepreneurs in the millions. He's sold hundreds of thousands of his books, popularized the concept sales funnels. He's co-founded the software company ClickFunnels that has gone to over 100 million and 55,000 customers in just 3 years. He is the king of funnels, the internet's favorite entrepreneur, affiliate marketing genius, container of expert secrets. He is an American storyteller. Ladies and gentlemen, bring to the stage with a thunderous 10x applause, Mr. Russell.
Nice. So you that was pre-recorded?
That was so funny. They ended up giving me this little box with a microphone, and they're like, all right, can you just take the script? Because I was also a stage manager. My buddy did all the production, so he's like, hey, because he knew that I was kind of getting into this world. And he goes, hey, we're doing Grant's thing in Vegas. I know you're going to, and I was hosting my other event the week before, so it just worked out. And he's like, you know, do you want to come and, did you get back to you? Okay, you're good.
Yeah.
Do you want to come be the stage manager? Because he knew I did production, whatever. And then it happened to be, he's like, hey, Grant's actually asking for voiceover. We don't have anybody that can do it, but you do radio, right? So like, you do it. So I did it. So I'm literally in like one of the locker rooms, and I'm like screaming at the top of my lungs. A couple of times people open the door like, you okay? And it's like, yeah, I'm good. I must have recorded some of those like 8 or 10 times each. But the funny thing is, I ended up doing the 30-day ClickFunnels challenge with Russell. And day 5, I think it was, on the challenge, he plays that video. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's me. I was like, I didn't get any royalties for that.
Right? Did you sign them away, or was it, were you able to renegotiate it?
No, because I that was really kind of just like a random deal that I did, you know, when I was on site with my buddy with the production company. So yeah, it was, but it's, you know, I love being on stage. I love live audiences. It's been my life. Live audiences has been part of, you know, every part of my being since I can remember. And when I truthfully ask myself, well, what do I want to continue? I wanted to continue doing that just on a different level. And that's where the power of Re started to kind of form, where I said, okay, I want to speak, and I want to be able to travel and do these events, but I want to do it with substance now, because I love everything that I've done, and it's been an exciting career, and I've had so many awesome opportunities, but it wasn't doing anything for me anymore. I mean, even when I started my company, like, I was so excited to just start a company that I did whatever I needed to do it, and I did it. And then I realized, like, okay, well, I don't want to do this anymore. It wasn't fulfilling me, and radio wasn't fulfilling me anymore. And, you know, interviewing, you know, Kim Kardashian and celebrities wasn't doing it much for me anymore either. And the power of Re kind of came from the thought process of, I'm almost 40, married, kids, coming out of a business. Now I have a degree. What do I do next? Like, what is going to make me happy, fulfill me? And I remember waking up at like 4 o'clock in the morning one night, and I was praying about it. And it's like, I felt like God just started feeding me this information about resetting. I started to research what re is, and I don't know if you know what re is, but the prefix of re means again and anew. To reset means to set anew or to start again, meaning at 0.00. And the challenge, or not even the challenge, but the reality is that is a very difficult thing because most people know they don't want to reset. Tell somebody they got to start over, and to do it properly, start over from the beginning is very difficult because mentally your conscious is probably going to conflict with your limited beliefs in your subconscious, and we can't start over, and that's why a lot of people who get a divorce and get remarried usually have sometimes, I don't know the statistics in divorce, but have the same issues because they kind of jump into a new relationship at 30%.
Well, and because they haven't renewed themselves, they end up attracting the same person that they were before. They just have a different face. Yeah. So they end up having the same relationship again. And they do that with their relationships. They do that with jobs. I mean, I'm sure you know people who have, they get to a point and then they find their adversary at work or whatever. And they're like, oh, take this job and shove it, right? And then they go to a new job. And then in short order, they're in the same position again. Because wherever you go, there you are. And unless you change who you are, you will continue to attract what you've been attracting.
Yeah, and what I've learned in putting all the information together, and I've looked at a lot of the scientific data, I looked at a lot of the biblical spiritual components because they all, whether you're spiritual or not, if you look at so many aspects that are scriptures that are in the Bible, they're relative to what science is saying, and the truth is that when you start to look at the brain, and I follow like Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Caroline Leaf. There's a lot of studies coming out now that has to do exactly with the mind. And the reason why motivation is garbage, the reality, that's just a term. If you don't reprogram your thought process and you don't do it in repetition and repetitively over a course of time, then it's like exercising. You can't expect to go to the gym, for a day and lose weight and have muscle. You got to go, 5 days a week for the next.
Oh, you mean you don't eat a salad once and you're healthy?
No,
I lifted one. I lifted a weight. Come on, I should be. Where's my six pack?
Yeah, exactly. So it's been interesting, really understanding. Like at first, when I started watching, several years ago, started like tuning into like discovering, the Tony Robbins of the world, Eric Thomas, Les Brown, listening to these videos. And at first, I was getting all hyped up, but then I realized that the hype was like very short term, almost like having a drink or getting high. And it's like, it lasts you for, a moment and then it's gone. So the question was, how do you figure out how to understand really what makes you happy and how do you sustain what that's going to look like? And it's a process. So one of the things I started putting together with Reset was reset, rethink, restart, right? Humans we need to be given some sort of structure. What I think that the community and the industry in that world is not doing the best of, they write all these books, they do a lot of this talking, and a lot of it is kind of, and no disrespect to the community, but it's one directional. And it's, well, this is how I got famous. This is how I think you can get rich and successful. You need to do it this way. Where as human beings, right? Not human was, not human will be, we're human beings. Everybody thinks in a different manner because our subconscious programming already has certain things that on a daily basis, it's already dictating our reality. So how can you take one method and use that method to change your course if that method may not work for you? It might work for Jim and John and Billy and Tony and whatever, but it may not work for you. So I said, well, one of the things that I always noticed is I wasn't really left with any real thing to say, okay, well, then how do I do it? Like, you're telling me this is what you do to be famous, whatever, but you're not really giving me like a blueprint, a game plan. Or you're giving me the game plan and it's so specific to how you did it, it's not really aligning itself the way that may work for me. Whether it's the way I take in information, the way I just am. So the idea of, as we're producing this course, is not out yet. It's being, we're still working through everything, but everything is RE. It's under, people say the power of words. It's really understanding words. Funny enough, I was going to do a post the year before last for New Year's, a New Year's resolution post. Well, the word resolution means to resolve or not resolve something. So
resolute.
You're almost making a decision like, well, I may or may not lose weight, or I may or may not stop smoking. So if words are that powerful, which I believe that they are, because you're inputting those words into your brain, and your brain is just going to, react where the brain has the data to react. Starting to understand what the words actually meant became very significant. And when I found out what re meant, I'm like, everything has re. Think about it. I'm tailoring a lot of what I do around the whole re concept. But as I was starting to play with it, I started to really notice so many people, pastors, speakers, motivators, coaches, using the re in bulks, like rebuild, restructure, relive, start your life over again. So the power of re, ultimately, we reset, rethink, restart. That's the first part of the way you should look at it. So when you reset, and it's some of it's, and I felt like it was given to me, but it's a little bit numerology in a way without me planning it, but it's 3 levels down and then 7 levels across. Under reset, you have to have a reason, right? And a lot of this stuff is typical information. I'm just kind of repackaging it. So,
well, of course, I mean, there is the one thing about this industry, and when we get into personal development, from the Bible to, any book that's out there, we're all in our own way saying the same thing, is in the outcome of improving our lives, rebuilding, resetting, reinventing, recreating, all of that. And the truth is that people are going to find their person and go, oh, okay, cool. All right, they're speaking, they put it in a language like school. There's that one teacher that you connect with and you go, cool. They explained it in a way that I get. And it's not that someone else wasn't sharing similar. And that's what's great about.
That's with pastors, that's with salespeople, that's with, you're gonna relate to somebody that makes sense for you. And in some cases it's, what's the word I'm forgetting? Not economical. Like certain people who relate to, let's say, well, Tony's on his own level, but with Grant, Grant, you're going to get a lot of real estate people, a lot of financial people. Like that's his thing. And then Eric Thomas, he gets a lot of people that are into sports and the sporting people of the world.
Right.
So but reset. You have to have a reason. Then there's 7 words under that relate to how do you establish your reason? And the cool thing is that, the power of re is going to be so evergreen in the sense that whatever you reset now could be different than what you might reset at the end of the year, what you might reset next summer. But whether it's a small reset or it's a hard reset, what happens that I believe to be true is people don't know how to dissect what their reset could be. They just don't know how to okay, I know I need to change. I know I want a new job. I know maybe I'm having problems in my marriage. I need to recommit. But how do I establish how to get there? So reset, reason, rethink, which is okay, well, what do I need to put together to figure out how to fix the reason? And then restart is actually launching and taking action to setting it forward. I started to do research, trying to understand 21 days, 30 days, what's the hype? Come to find out, Dr. Caroline Leaf, they're saying that now it takes approximately 63 consecutive days of repetition to truly start reprogramming the processes of how your mind thinks and establishing new neural pathways, so on and so forth. So for me, it starts to become real fascinating because all that stuff makes sense. Law of attraction, it does make sense. If you look at it from a biblical perspective, in the Bible it says, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be open unto you. That's law of attraction. So Jesus is actually even saying hey, if you just seek, you're going to be it's the universe. It's the universe. It's God. It's whatever perspective and whatever words or titles you want to put on certain things. It's all this. everything is working in a weird way. So the power of my goal is to be able to take that, and I'm going through the process myself, even as I'm developing it, of setting a new course and separating myself from, Cruz radio personality, DJ, to what I want the next level and season of my life to be. And what I would hope to do is filter out all the stuff, and then hopefully develop something that has substance and value. And, as a father now, I hope to leave a legacy for my children, but more importantly, if I can leave with a contribution to the world that, was helpful and an asset, then that's really, and it's hard. It hasn't been easy because I'm still fighting with my own internal demons and the challenges of life. And then obviously with Corona and protesting and everything else, it's like, I try not to watch some of that stuff sometimes because then it gets into your programming, and then it starts to say that the world is crazy and, what's the use? And we can't think like that.
Yeah, that's such a fine line, because on one level, when things are going on like that, it's like, okay, I'm going to jump out of a plane. I got to make sure I'm wearing a parachute. So there's a necessity to have awareness, and I completely agree. Spending our time focused on all of that is going to take us out of the game, because that's going to program into our minds. I mean, and unfortunately, I believe that's we're seeing right now the programming manifest, the expectations of what certain people should have or not have. Like you shared earlier, some people don't. Well, here's the thing. I don't think that there are some people who are clear. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be, have that level of opulence, that level of success. And I think though that Andy Warhol, I
think that's a fear.
A fear of success.
Yeah, or people they've been programmed when they were little that their parents said, you just need to work hard and don't worry about trying to be a millionaire, and well, right, but then they see we want, all these reality shows, and we're conditioned to making sure our picture is taken just right to look perfect, and the marketing of ourselves, and that everybody's going, hey, I'm a brand too. What's my brand on Facebook? Such to the point. Have you seen that meme where it's like, here's my picture for Instagram, here's my picture for LinkedIn, here's my picture for Facebook, here's my picture for TikTok, here's my picture for Tinder, right? And that is a branding, marketing conversation, and how conditioned we are to the optics and how things are going to look. And we're seeing it right now with, with the protesting and the positioning and, all of that, which is bizarre. But at the end of the day, I think Warhol was right. Everybody wants their 15 minutes. And it gets very complicated because I think other than consciously, yes, we have the programming we had, and then we also have if I get to that level of success, then it's going to require more work. I'm going to have to work harder. Yet at the same time, they see people like you make it look easy, and then they go, well, all I need to do is just, write a book. And then all of a sudden all I need to do is call up a radio station, and then they're going to give me a job, because they're not seeing the length and the consistency. Because on television, you'd never buy a diet pill that said, or a program that said, this program is going to be extraordinarily challenging. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be painful. You're going to be uncomfortable. And it's going to take at least 63 days in order to get results. And you're like, and then another one says, all you got to do is 5 minutes a day. And even that, it's only 3 days a week. Yeah. You go, I want that one. Well, yeah, it's funny because I kind of got sucked into that rabbit hole of, and this is probably like a little less than a year ago, all these guys on YouTube, like every time I get into a video, it's like, hey, all right, so you want to learn, you see this stack of cash right here? I'm going to tell you to make $100,000 in just 24 hours, and you don't have to do anything, and you can work from the beach. That's just, I don't know if you've ever seen this. I've seen this before. I'm sure you probably have seen it. You ever see a car like in a parking lot, and it's like a beat up car, beat up truck or whatever, and it says, you know, work part-time from home and make $5,000 a week. And I'm like, okay, you took some shoe paint, but if you're making $5,000 a week, you wouldn't be driving that car.
Yeah.
But, you know, but to also go back to what you said earlier about the whole, you know, filter, Instagram, TikTok, you know, science, and there has been the data of people coming out that's part of a whole, you know, warfare of manipulation, utilizing our dopamine, you know, and our brains. That's an algorithm, and every time we're seeing these things, it's telling our brain like, "Ooh, we feel good. Ooh, that I got 17 more likes." And ooh, you know,
it's actually the internet is on the DSM-5 as a diagnostic tool for you know, for addiction. The internet and social media is now in the DSM-5 as diagnoses as an addiction that is treatable.
Yeah, and it's an addiction.
Yeah.
It really is. You know, so, and, you know, and I know you've worked in that industry before, you know, I try to tell people you can't downplay one addiction for another, because you might look at somebody who has an alcohol addiction or an eating disorder. It's the same mental breakdown that's happening for somebody who literally can sit on their Facebook feed or Instagram feed for an hour and a half and never look up.
Yep.
And they just literally and I've seen people like that, and it's messing around with the same, you know, brain mechanisms that, you know, when somebody gets a substance addiction. Yep. It's the same thing. It's
more the dopamine, and whereas serotonin is actually produced when you accomplish something. That's more internal, whereas dopamine is getting it from the external experiences. When we work hard, when we put in effort, when we challenge ourselves, that's when serotonin kicks in, which is more sustainable and is actually healthier for us rather than, you know, the addiction to dopamine. You know, to call someone a dope, I mean, it's where it came from. Someone's just like being dopey because their brain, they're not thinking when they're filled with dopamine. And
so if I say, yo, kid, that was dope, is that different?
Maybe. I don't know. It's well, again, and talking about language, like when you just shared that, I think, you know, we have an interesting experience with our relationship with language, because while it is, especially the English language, is the most flexible and most action-oriented, it's also, language is very limiting, because then it creates a box through which, and we each have different relationships with a word anyway, right? Because you could say, you know, I'm angry, and that could have one meaning to you. Someone else could say I'm angry, and it could have like a whole web of meanings to it. And that's what's challenging about it, because very often, we can't help it, we have our model of the world, and when someone says something and they use the same words we use, they're saying something very different internally. It's quite a quagmire.
It is a perception. I mean, for example, what I've noticed recently, and I actually saw two different groups of people yesterday at my visit to Walmart getting into a confrontation about this is where I also think there's a manipulation in the higher levels of our world, of this whole 6 foot distance stuff, where people, like, if you're not 6 feet, I was getting on a plane from Colorado Sunday, and the lady in front of me, and I was rushing to get on a plane. I get on the little walking thingy, and I'm just rushing. I went from one place to the other. I'm wearing the damn mask. I'm sweating. I'm annoyed. And I don't know, I was maybe like 4 feet away from the lady in front of me. And then she steps to the side and she goes, do you just want to go? You know, and I'm like, no, I'm not in any rush. She goes, well, you're not 6 feet. And I'm like, you're about to get on a plane.
And you might be sitting next to me. Yeah.
And you're about 3.5 feet away from just the one little seat in the middle that's separating you from the other person. And but it's a mental thing. Mm-hmm. You really think, if you had such a problem about being 6 feet away from somebody, then order curbside and pick it up outside, you know, or don't get on a plane. But
or move yourself a little bit.
Huh?
Or she could have moved herself 2 feet.
Yeah, she could have. But it's just, it really just goes back to, and this is what I'm excited about, what I want to do with Reset is to build awareness of not really, of course, of science and everything around this, but also to have people just become more engaged on learning who you are, because that's the only person that you can control and fix. Mm-hmm. And even in relationships, like a therapist will say, you know what, I'm going to just try to fix the husband or the wife, because I can't fix them both. If I fix the one, then hopefully what they do will help manipulate the other one, and then it'll start to work. But, you know, a lot of the people who really speak truth are the ones that say, like, until you fix you, nothing else around you is going to change. So the hardest part, I think, is just, like I said earlier, dissecting what your reason is, what that next level of your life could look like. And then you it's almost like a diet and coming up with like a nutrition, plan. You have to break it down and like lay it out, or putting a puzzle together. Like, I haven't put a puzzle together in a while, but what do you do when you put a puzzle together? You put a puzzle, and normally I think what I do is I take the corners and put the corners out.
Well, first thing, you got to have the vision. You got to have the picture.
Yeah, because pictures in front of you. The life's a mess. It's all scattered in front of you. Like, okay, I know what and you're right, because that's part of the law of attraction. You got to have this goal of where you're going to get to even attempt to get there. Mm-hmm. But it is mental. Because I remember when I ran my marathon, that in the last like 4 miles, it became straight up mental. I mean, unless you're a seasoned marathon runner, it was all mental at that point. Mm-hmm. If I didn't kind of stay out of my head and stay focused on just running, getting to the end, I would have never made it, because my physical body was like, stop, we're dying. Yeah. But that's, and for me, the most exciting part of, getting to this new chapter and developing and coming out of some spiritual warfare of the stuff that I've dealt with and all the things that I've been through is it's given me a new passion and a new drive and a new reason to challenge myself, because you get to that point where you just get so like, and speaking of reset, with all this coronavirus stuff, a lot of people have been thrown a massive curveball, and they've been given a hard life reset, and now they got to figure out what to do. Maybe you worked at a nightclub, and now what do you do? Maybe you worked at a restaurant and you made all your money, but now you're working, 5 hours a week versus 40 hours a week. Some businesses right now are completely crushed, and they have to reset and figure out, what can I do next? But I think it just takes, you got to break it down a little bit and then kind of look at it, like putting a puzzle together, kind of look at it and consider your vision of what the future is going to look like. And then look at the pieces in front of you and say, okay, how do I put this thing together? And how do I make it work? And how do I make this look like that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, dude. I mean, again, we're painting the same square, right? We all use different colored markers. There's only, but the square's a square. Some of us use, different colors. Some of us use a pencil or a pen or a paintbrush or what have you. At the end of the day, all roads lead to Rome, right? Yeah. And one of the things you shared earlier when you talked about, the Bible, ask and you shall receive and seek and you shall find. That is so true, because our brains, we have this, RAS, or reticular activator system, which, when a thing happens, right? So you go, let's say you bought a car, and at the time when you bought it, you're like, oh, this is like, I've never seen it before. It's new, it's special, it's unique. And then as soon as you drive off the lot, everybody's got them. Right now, that's the phone, Facebook algorithms are an RAS. It's a digital RAS. Yeah. Because when you engage in some, oh, screw this guy, this, that, or whatever, Facebook algorithm goes, oh, you want more. And it provides more of that. Yeah. So what we need to do is, as we're working on this is, and then again, using the Bible, to whom much is given, much is expected, much is required. That choice, what are we going to choose to focus on? Are we going to choose to focus on the opportunities to reset, to rethink, to restart, to reboot? Right? Which is, you shared earlier, you refuse to stay in the victim mentality, right? And because that's a choice. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think what happens, we get conditioned to, when we talk about the programming, I think a lot of us and this is typical in personal development world, is a lot of people get conditioned to being a victim. They get rewarded for being a victim. And then it's hard to break out of that, because then if I'm not a victim, now I have to take personal responsibility. And if it doesn't go the way I want it to go, I have to then take responsibility rather than blame someone else and then expect someone else to fix it. And part of the resetting and the rethinking is changing that philosophy, that mindset, taking personal responsibility, and then taking the steps necessary, whether it be anything from the meditation to, like figuring out what that's going to be for each person. Because some people are going to find, like as an example, I love Tony, and he became my mentor because I love the high energy, the music, the breakthroughs. And like, my events in Heidi's, like, we're very high energy with breakthroughs and tons of music and all that, where other people love Dr. Joe. Dr. Joe is not super high energy. It's all, a lot of meditation and, working at it that way. And they both work. And it's great to combine.
Earlier about, when you relate to certain people right. Just, it works. But the other thing too is we're programmed to be habitual. Mm-hmm. And I've read some studies, and I try to mess around with it once in a while, because if you really were conscious every single day when you put on your shoes or you take a shower, we do literally everything in the same repetitive manner every single day, because it's your brain. It just knows. And sometimes
try putting your pants on the other leg first.
Yeah, and I joke about it sometimes, like, oh, there I go, washing the right arm again, the same way I did yesterday. Or there I go, washing my left arm again, the same way I did yesterday. And in some cases, it'll tell you just on a funny level, just the hardest part is having the ability to catch it often.
Right.
When you can start to catch it often, then you can start to figure out if you wanted to kind of reprogram it. But the coolest thing about it, that I think is the neatest thing, is that you start to really be present and you start to notice exactly what's happening. And that's the craziest thing about the brain. And we were having a conversation, and I saw somebody doing a study. They said, how is it that a person who's completely wasted get home? Drives home. Shouldn't be driving, not endorsing that. How do they get home? They get home because the subconscious mind already knows the programming. Since you started driving when you were 16, okay, and you might really F this up along the way. That's usually what happens, because your physical and your mental are not 100% in alignment, but your subconscious, okay, well, we just turn the key in, and we sit down and turn the thing on, mm-hmm. and it knows, your brain knows how to get home, because it's already got that. It's got that program in there. It knows, okay, I got to go down this street, go down the street. Now, whether you get there safely or not is a whole different, perspective. But it was astonishing to me, because they kind of did a study, and they were trying to make sense of, well, how do people get up in the morning and say, I don't even remember getting up. Well, you didn't have to remember, because your subconscious mind did remember.
Yep.
But it's scary, but that's the reality of how your brain really is thinking. Yeah,
we spend most of our time in trance, not like out of, so like while I hypnosis, right? I'm hypnotic. I am board certified in hypnosis. The truth is, most of the work I'm doing is taking people out of trance, because that's it. We're in that habit of doing things. I mean, think about it. How many times, like people who have a job and they go to a certain, like their job is there, like using the car as the example, and then they drive halfway to work and they go, oh, I'm not going to work today. I got to go the other direction. I was headed towards, I got to go shopping or whatever it is, because we just get in the car, get in there. And that's the key. And the successful people, and what you're sharing is, they catch the habits that are non-supportive and create new habits that are going to be supportive to their ultimate outcome. Yeah.
And then make those more successful habits their habitual routine,
right,
on a daily basis. And the whole thing that I've learned is catching that. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing is amazing, because with hypnosis, I think it's one of three major opportunities that you have to reprogram.
Right.
The coolest thing that I've learned, and the thing with, I think, with reset, or just in life in general, however you decide to go down that path, if you decide, changing your life for whatever manner, good or bad, is that we do have the ability to reprogram.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can say one of the, anything to say on this call, is that something to it's almost like when you're reborn, in Christianity, and I'm a Christian, being reborn is being able to like just shut everything down, throw it to the side and starting over again. And that's a spiritual reset. But if you can just know that you have the capacity within you to just start over, like start over. You could be 60 years old and whatever, and you've always wanted to start a fried chicken restaurant. Go do it. But what most people are going to be, I'm 6 years old. You're not dead. Mm-hmm. Go do that, or go get a job at Kentucky Fried Chicken and just be around it for a little bit. And then you might realize, like, I don't want to do this. But the cool thing is that you can reprogram, and again, no disrespect to certain addictions or whatever, but a lot of the stuff that is implemented now to helping prevent, I don't truly believe that a lot of different things and all the different stuff is, and I don't want to say any one particular, but I don't truly believe a lot of it works, because until you can accept it here and are willing to change it, you gotta want to. And what happens is most people, besides the chemical imbalances, most people never really want to, so they'll never really change. And that's just the issue. Unless
they don't get what they're other than consciously getting in return for those behaviors.
Yeah.
With all the work that I did in addiction, and one of the things that we realized is, and I'm not diagnosing or undiagnosing anybody. See, drugs and alcohol are the solution. They're not the problem. As is shopping, sex, gambling, food, what have you. It's all meeting certain needs. But the more I worked with people, I realized, like, you know what? It looks to me like, even, again, not diagnosing, undiagnosing anybody, but clinical depression oftentimes is someone simply addicted to depression. Their body is wired to it. They're getting the dopamine and all of that. Even though it doesn't feel good, it's still adrenaline. It's still getting some stuff happening, and they're getting secondary gains. They're getting reinforced. They're getting continued conditioning to it. I remember I was working with a client, and I was doing a thing in we're using values and rules and so forth. And the kid shared, as we were unpacking stuff, his most important values was love. He wanted to feel love, right? And that's, for most people, that's ultimately if we break it down. But then I asked him, okay, so how do you know you're loved? How do you know you're loved? And he said, when my parents are disappointed in me. He said, when my parents are disappointed in me, or when my parents get upset with me.
Yeah, so they're carrying a lot of that stuff from when they were kids.
That programming was, the way I know I feel love is when my parents are upset, because that was how he realized that they cared. That didn't come out until we started doing the work. Other than conscious, because, oh my gosh, wow, I have this other than conscious programming, which I would then go out and create situations to disappoint my parents, so then I would know that I was loved.
Yeah, and then you have that acceptance. And then you carry that all the way through. So if you never resolve that, that'll be an issue, an underlying issue for a very long time. I started to go to a buddy of mine in Miami. He has a company called Pathwaves. And he does neuro pathway algorithm kind of reprogramming. And the first test that I did was about 3.5 hours long. Like, we do full brain scan. And some people just like, that's crazy. That's not going to work. You're going to get radiation. But at one point, he's reading all these numbers. It's just numbers. It's all algorithm, numbers and stuff. And he's looking and he was pinpointing stuff within a year. He goes, when you were about 17, did you have some traumatic head concussion or something? And I remember that something in that time frame had happened. I said, yeah. And then it was really weird, but he went to just before I was born, and he goes, for some reason, you have a fear. He was a fear of that I had a fear of entering life in the fetal stage. And whatever it was, it could have been that, that my parents' divorce, but it could have been, because that was probably around the time that they got divorced, and it could have been that there was altercations and arguments and stuff happening that, but how crazy is it that your brain is that powerful?
Oh, it stores it all.
It remembers the stuff that I've learned, it remembers everything. Even anything that's why, like, even biblically it says, be careful what you see and what you let your mind, your eyes retain, because everything's just getting stored away. And which goes to some of the stuff that they talk about, when you die, that your whole life is going to flash in front of you. It's because it's going to literally be like one quick replay of everything.
Right.
That would be a little scary.
Well, and I think that brings you back to the point earlier where you shared, like not watching the news too much and all of that, because it's just, embedding those thoughts, those negativities, those emotions, and especially depending how it makes you feel. That's people get addicted to watching the news. They get addicted to the drama. They get addicted to all of that. And then they take it into their lives, and then they yell at people for being 4 feet away instead of 6.
Well, it's how you start. I used to watch the Today Show religiously. 7 a.m., the little sound, da, 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 and then it would say, today, there's a bombing here, and somebody was shot there, and somebody was kidnapped. And then it's like, okay, great. I'm going to get my coffee, jump in the shower. And Jim Rohn also talks about, in his earlier days, he would get up and he would read the newspaper, right? The more classic version of television media. And, in the headlines of the newspaper would be somebody got killed, the stock market crashed. And he goes, and that's how it would start my whole day, with a whole bunch of negative information. Whereas if you listen to a lot more powerful people now, whether it's like the Les Browns and Tonys just giving the common ones, you should have a ritual each morning. Like, in my own little world, I don't do the hour thing, like that power hour type stuff, but because I don't really have the time. I should, but I do like my little prayers, and I'm like, thank you for today. Today's gonna be great. It's gonna be positive, and I try to get going with that. I get in the shower. I usually take my phone. I throw on whatever video, some sort of motivational 10-minute thing, and on the background, that's all the stuff that's playing. And even when I'm at the gym, I never really listen to music at the gym. I'm always listening to somebody speaking, some coaching something. Because even if I phase out, well, what's happening? Even if I phase out, my brain is still taking in all the megabytes of that. So
that's why I sleep wearing headphones.
That's why hypnosis is. That's exactly what hypnosis is. Yep. But you just reprogram. And I've done that for a lot of things. Even with some stress and anxiety and some of the sleeping self hypnosis stuff is awesome. It takes a little bit. The one thing that's a challenge for me is my brain is constantly like always thinking. My biggest challenge was like to just settle my mind and to just be, and then be present and allow that particular hypnotic session to connect, because there has to be that. There is, and this, but people who don't get it, or it's hard for them to meditate or even be. It's not about. Hypnosis is not some weird stuff that you become a zombie and you start jumping like a dog and stuff.
Right, that's stage hypnosis, which is a different thing.
I jumped out of, I popped out of like mid-level hypnosis, like 40 minutes in, and all of a sudden, like, I have to get up or something. And I kind of lift right out of where I was and just kind of get right back into present reality. And, it's kind of a rude awakening when that happens, but here's what it is sometimes. But it works. On my program, the hypnosis that I have, the music is embedded with binaural beats. So it's also helping lower the brain waves anyway, just to speed the process up, even though each session is 25 to 40 minutes. And they're all, anyway, but yeah, it is a practice, whether you're doing, meditation. And that's why I do these guided meditations, because to just sit quietly, it's even harder because your brain does go all over the place. Yeah. So if you at least have something to focus on, that gives you the ability to allow yourself to let go, because you're focused on the one thing and allowing the others to fade out. Yeah. And funny enough, one thing that I've learned in recent, as I've been working on all these different things, is that, speaking of binaural, and I'm not sure how many people are listening understand what binaural is, but I've learned I think it's 4 or 5 levels of waves. You have alpha, beta, delta. Often now, I literally will put on 1, 2, 3 hour sessions of depending, like, alpha binaural or to work. So I'll literally just put on my headset, and the way my brain functions, to me, it's the word I'm looking for. It's like I need it, right? It balances my brain activity, because then otherwise what happens is, and I don't know if that's ADHD or all that other garbage stuff out there, but unfortunately, I guess that's how we process. So for me, sometimes I process better, and maybe because I'm overthinking, it allows my brain to, like, okay, work over here, listening to the beats, while I'm actually working on something over here. And whether the left and the right hemisphere of the mind are kind of, I mean, they say you should be working collectively, but I don't know how that's possible. That's a whole method of getting your brain to work in uniform.
Well, again, I think all of this is part of the journey, and each of us are going to have our own strategies to get to the same outcome.
Yeah.
And I think, like you shared earlier, it's when you dig into different ways, like, I use the example sometimes of, if you just find one strategy, you end up, you ever go to the gym and you see the guys who, like, just only do upper body?
Yeah.
So they look like lollipops, right? They got these big arms and stuff, and then like little tiny legs, or a funnier version of that. And to get a little naughty, Family Guy.
I know
Family Guy. So there's this show, Family Guy, and Quagmire is like this sex addict guy, and they let him know about the internet and how there's porn on the internet, and he was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And like, "Oh yeah, you could get anything that you want on there." And he's like, "Really?" And then he disappears. For weeks, he doesn't show up. And like, "Oh, we got to go check on him." They go knock on the door, and they're like, "Hey, where are you?" And he comes in, he's like all disheveled, his face is like all grown in and stuff. And like, "Quagmire, what have you been doing?" He's like, I don't know. And then they just do a little, he's like, "Yeah, I've been busy." And they like then do a cutaway to his one side, like he looks normal, like you just see his little one arm, and then he turns and he's got his right arm is like all jacked, and he's like. Obviously been busy, but if we only work the one muscle, we're not in balance. So it's not just diet, it's diet and exercise. It's not just meditation, it's meditation and action. It's not just visualization, it's visualization and tying it to purpose. Like it's more than one thing. And it's also really beneficial to find multiple teachers, because they're going to have the level of expertise that allows you to get to a certain level. And then you go, "Oh, now I get what so-and-so was saying. Oh, wow." And then you just keep going back and,
well,
take to the next level.
It's also the willingness to learn and to think outside of the box and learn outside of the box and educate and utilize some of that energy and time to put stuff in your brain that actually makes sense.
Yep, bread for the head.
We live in an economy where people just they'll go hypnotize themselves, no pun intended. And listen, I've had my share of binge watching Netflix. I mean, you get into a show like House of Cards, and it's like, I got to watch all the way to the end. Right. So I do a full one-day sit down. But, but I see it again. I don't know if it's because it's a mentality, but like, I get excited to dig into, like lately, developing this process of the power of but this goes back to our inner beings and how we're built. Because not everybody, that doesn't excite them. Like, if you look at a Gary Vee, to create something new, to build a new business, to conquer, it's in them to do so. I heard Gary once say that he wishes that there was a drug that would make him less ambitious. I wish I can not want to have to conquer everything and take control of everything. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. People look at that as like, it's arrogant or, but it's not. Like it's in your being. Like just like you, Doug. You don't have to do these Zooms and it's something you decide you want to do. I'm sure you enjoy the rapport and one of the things that I always love doing with interviews, I just love having the conversations with celebrities. Right. It was more like, So what do you like? Do you wipe your butt like with toilet paper, or is it like
you sandpaper? Just curious.
And it's just so this research and what I'm doing, and it has been a process to self discipline and self motivate me, because nobody else is going to do it.
Right.
Same way with you. You're self-motivated, you're self-disciplined to like, all right, I'm going to make these calls. I'm going to get in contact with Cruz. I'm going to do a Zoom. I'm going to put it on the calendar. I'm going to get it done. Because my people talk about doing a podcast or a webinar thing, and they'll say, yeah, I've been wanting to do it, and I have a great concept and a great idea. Have you done your first one? Yeah, well, I got to get this. I got to get the LED ring. I got to get a cool camera. I got to get a backdrop. I got to get my hair done. My nails did. And it's like, by the time you do that, next thing you know, your brain's like, you just lost a week because your brain went in a whole different direction. And it's like, you went back to reality, back to your normal job, your life that you hate, the girlfriend that you don't want to be with. And it's like, okay, now what? So, when you hear little distinctive one-liners that certain people like Tony says, you got to take massive action. Because you have to take massive action. Or Steve Harvey would say, you got to jump. Like, you can't stand in the airplane with a backpack on saying, oh my God, it'd be so cool to skydive right now. No, then jump. You got to go, So.
Well, and one of the things that Tony shares as well, he said, look, people overestimate what they could do in a month or in a year, and they underestimate what they could do in a decade.
Yeah.
Or
you think about the end result and you overwhelm yourself with like
trying to do everything at once.
All these things. I got to get a book. I got to get a course. And I've done it. And then instead of just thinking about all that, because that comes with the efforts, I'm getting more, and this is programming. Mm-hmm. Okay, what can I do today? I'm going through all my notes. I have so many notes on the course and they're all over the place. So lately what I've been doing is just like going through them and sorting them out, and working with a buddy of mine as a copywriter and say, okay, how do I put this puzzle together? This is my first, course of action. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward, hopefully the next 6 months is going to start to blossom a little bit better than the first half of the first
What's
quarter.
Your vision for the way people will experience it?
Which part?
Well, the program, as you're putting it together, is it the book you're putting it together? Is it?
Yeah, like you say, the book is the calling card. It's a little bit more of like a reflection of the process of kind of how I got to where it is. I mean, my goal is, for the course, it'll be in levels of it's so funny because I never planned it to be that way, but the numbers ended up calculating 3 across, 7 down, and then that was, if you times that, it was 21, and then 21 days wasn't enough, and then 21 times 3 actually became 63. So with these numbers, just like numerically, I can say that word. Numerically, start to just make sense. And I was like, wow, this just whatever level, it's working. But my goal is that it'll just be a resource. I like to also call it like a life recipe. Like, I'm gonna give you the ingredients, and I'm technically giving you the recipe of how to make lasagna, but then it's up to you to create the lasagna however you think you want to make. You want to add a little bit more salt, add a little bit more, hamburger meat or whatever the case is. So at the end of the day, it becomes yours. Mm-hmm. So it's becoming that resource to help you, hopefully, help people, break down those barriers and those walls of essentially fear, or also just having the confidence to completely set your life back to zero and not be afraid to kind of start all over again, because that's really what life is. And whatever you think about it, there's a reset happening in your life all day long. When you when you leave high school and you graduate and you go to college, or you leave high school and you go to the workplace, it's a reset. So whatever you knew in high school as a student is going to be different than what you'll know, in life as an employee or whatever the case is. Or you go from being single to being married, or, just there resets constantly happen in your life. It's how you deal with it, or how you embrace it in the present form. And that's one thing that I'm trying to really take on a lot more, is just really what's happening right now. Forget about what happened yesterday, forget about what's going to happen tomorrow. Whatever's happening now is what's happening, human being. And essentially what I do today will remove and, no longer have to look backwards, because when they say when you plow a field, the farmer never plowed looking backwards. He just goes forward. And whatever I do today, will hopefully start to dictate and set the stones in place to what I want to do tomorrow and the week after.
Well, and that's the power of compound interest, right? So like if we were to change and improve our life 1% every day in a year, how much of a percentage of improvement would we experience?
Yeah.
And it's
people
not
are looking all the way over here. And, to go back to everything that I've done in radio and all that stuff, I mean, almost 20 years in radio. I mean, where I ended up and how I started, the journey in between is like, it's a big gap. But sometimes, people don't look at that. They want to look at they just want to look at the end results. And that's
and you bring up something interesting. Well, I don't know if you experienced this, because I did in what I was doing in music. Either myself when I was signed or my friends' bands that were signed, they would think, oh yeah, you have a record deal, you must be making tons of money. And most of my friends who had record deals had day jobs. They would leave to go on tour. And like what you're sharing, like people go, oh, you're on the radio, you must be making tons of money. And you're like, no, I have 2 other gigs that I'm actually doing, and it's so interesting how the perception that they think that if you're on the air, you must be making tons of money.
Yeah. I had a friend that signed with Jimmy Iovine, and he was with Def Jam. And he signed the deal, and he got shelved for an entire year. And at the end of 12 months, they actually dropped him.
Mm-hmm.
So, meanwhile, people were like, oh, man, you're with Def Jam and Jimmy Iovine. Like, oh, my God, you're so awesome. And he did a couple of songs and some things, but it never went anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a persona. And that's the kind of imprisonment that we're in, that especially now with social media, is we become so engaged with what we see on television or we see on the internet, or like I said earlier jokingly, that guy from the Amazon drop ship program that he's going to make you a millionaire, and he's driving the Lambo, and you could be just like him,
which he rented for the picture.
Yeah. And then it gets in your head. And honestly, I looked at that same thing, and then one day I just like, you know what? I really thought about it. I was like, I don't want to do Amazon drop shipping. I don't want to do, multi-level marketing for whatever. You get sucked into what you think the opportunity is, or this picture that they paint for you, and you get all motivated, right? Mm-hmm. But then the reality is what I want to try to do with the reset is I want to, as I'm doing, to really kind of rediscover what makes me tick and what makes me happy, and then start to rebuild and restructure what I'm going to start doing next. And the only person that can do that is going to be me. So in the test beta phase, it's me kind of going through this, but what's going to make, I think, my program valuable is going to be, because I'm going to be the most valuable people in this business, and this, and I'll leave you with this, is that story, if it collides perfectly with what you're trying to do, then it's going to relate to the people that will humbly follow you, as the people who follow Tony, they become very loyal because they can relate and they can adapt to what they feel that their leader. And I heard somebody else talking a story the other day about, becoming more of a server and a leader. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you got to lead by example. Leaders not just being in charge and pointing the finger and telling everybody else what to do, but it's like, what are you doing that? And I try to do that, as a parent, and nobody gives you a course for that, but you got to lead by example. And okay, well, if I'm going to tell so-and-so to do whatever, then I got to be able to do the same thing.
Yep.
So, the journey continues. I appreciate you having me on. This was definitely a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do it again. And next time it'll be when I'm presenting the book and the course.
Amen, brother. And obviously, we're in that field, I believe in collaboration over competition. I have other, speakers who we are all doing the same thing on here, because I believe in that people are going to find their tribe. And like when you use Tony as an example, most of the Tony people who are, use Tony as their main resource aren't exclusive. They're not like, oh, I'm a Tony person and I don't go to, I wouldn't go to a Cruz. Like they're on the journey and they're willing to try like and experience everything because they know that it makes them a well-rounded person.
By the way, that last little part was an interview tactic that I learned over time. 2 parts of that. One thing I learned I learned at a couple of meetings is like they'll say something and I got to tell you this. I got to get out of here, but before I leave, let me give you this one last thing. So it's a cool interviewing tactic, and then figuring out how to wrap up a conversation without it seeming awkward or that we're like abruptly ending.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing to do because sometimes you have to know how to kind of. And I had it so many times when I would interview people. And then the back corner of the room, the publicist and the manager's like,
yeah, they're going,
you're like, and then you're noticing them, and I lose my train of thought. So you learn how to like.
You had your kids going, Daddy, come on.
So no, I really appreciate it. This is awesome. And if you ever need anything from me, let me know. I'm going to check out your website, guidedhypnotic.com.
Yeah, and then your site right there, chriscruzlive.com. There you go. So for those of us listening, and dude, thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, your experiences, and I love you for who you are and who you aren't. All right, brother. We'll see you shortly.
Thank you, my friend.
Right, peace. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging with us. And remember to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts right here. And we look forward to serving you even more. Remember, download your free guided hypnotic meditation at guidedhypnotic.com. That's guidedhypnotic.com, where you'll get your free anxiety-busting meditation. We look forward to serving you, and if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out. All right, we love you for who you are and who you aren't. God bless.